Well, I think the top priority for me is proper quantification of uncertainty in the quantitative decision support modeling in the broad sense, and factoring that into decision making in a proper way. I think this is something we tend to do rather badly at present, and there's a lot of missionary work to be done in this area. I would say risk modeling in dose response is an area that I've been involved in for some years, and we have some new ideas about how to do that. I would say another area that has come up recently is stakeholder preference modeling. Rational decision theory really has two parts. One part is quantifying uncertainty in the possible state of the world, and the other part is modeling our values or utilities. And for most of my career, I've been working on the uncertainty side. And recently, a couple years ago, I got interested in the valuation modeling, or preference modeling, as we sometimes say. And again, I think there are new mathematical techniques which we can apply to this area and move it forward. Let me give you a very simple example that captures a couple of these things. Suppose you have a headache and you go to the drugstore and you buy a bottle of pills. Now, the directions on the pills will say don't take more than 6 per day or something. But actually, we don't know how many pills you should take. So suppose, truth in advertising, the pill were to give you a distribution. If you are an average person, this distribution reflects the probability over the number of pills you should take. Now, what would you do? And this is the situation we are very frequently in. We have to consider taking an action or some remedial action or something to raise our benefit, and we don't really know what the effects of our actions will be. We can try to quantify the uncertainty over what might result. Well, in such a case, you see, you can't really decide properly unless you know what happens if you take too many pills or too few pills. So suppose it were the case that if you took one pill too many, you got violently ill for 3 weeks, whereas if you took a few pills too few, you simply suffered a little bit longer. Well, then you would take a very small number of pills in order to avoid that consequence. On the other hand, suppose that taking additional pills had no noxious effects at all, but taking too few just didn't do anything, then you would tend to take more than... So in order to decide what to do under uncertainty, you not only have to know what that uncertainty is, you have to know the effects of overshooting or undershooting. And so deciding under uncertainty involves these two pieces. And I think it's fair to say that our public decision-making at this point just doesn't do a very good job at that. Suppose we have to decide how much radiation workers can get in an emergency response situation. Well, we don't really know how much radiation or a given amount of radiation, what will be the damages from this exposure. We don't really know that, but we do quantify our uncertainty on this. So it's exactly the same type of situation. One of the things I've been involved in, and risk analysis has been involved in at the very beginning, is expert judgment. And the situation is such that with these large-scale systems, when something goes badly wrong, the systems are redesigned, the regulation regarding these systems is changed, and this means that these systems after an accident are not comparable to systems before the accident. So we never build up historical data to quantify our risk models by the nature of the case. So in building a risk model and quantifying this model, we must have recourse to expert judgment. And this has been a theme throughout my work, and a lot of risk analysis is directed to this. So we really want to look at expert judgment as a new form of scientific data, which we can use in a methodologically proper way to quantify our models and make this whole process transparent. And first, you have to be very clear what you want to ask. And this is a very difficult part of an expert judgment exercise, to formulate a protocol of the questions, exactly what you want to know. And I like to think of it as follows, that expert judgment is just a different way of doing experiments. And you should have questions that you could, in principle, ask to nature, but for various reasons practically cannot do so. So you ask these questions to experts who are familiar with the whole field and who can tell you what they think will probably happen and what their uncertainty is on what's going to happen if you could do such an experiment. And then we look at experts really as statistical hypotheses. When an expert says that he has a certain uncertainty distribution over the range of outcomes of some possible experiment, that is a statistical hypothesis, and that's how we look at it. And of course, EPA in the United States is toying with the area of expert judgment, and they're a little bit nervous about jumping in, and so they're hesitant because they are operating in a field with very large interests, and they are very reluctant to change their regime in a rapid and uncontrolled way. So they have the feeling that they have a lot of inertia in their regulatory system, and they have to deal with that. But in other areas, in particular in engineering fields, I think it's easy. People are more open to doing this, and it's easier to get such programs adopted and pursued. So I'm working now on a large project for the NASA to help in their uncertainty modeling, and they're very interested in expert judgment. And of course, they're designing new systems which haven't been deployed yet, and we have no operational data. So it's the only thing you can do is to quantify this uncertainty with the best available experts. Be that as it may, there are a number of risk situations which people have identified and for which they have asked that attention be given, and it doesn't happen. I mean, New Orleans is, of course, the best example. Other examples that colleagues of mine have analyzed are these the gambling riverboats that sail up and down in the river, and if one of these things capsizes or has an accident or a collision with a tanker or something, I mean, you dump several thousand people into an angry, cold river. And another one were the ferries in Seattle that have been identified. And so I think there are lots of things of which experts are aware that they are risks, but you don't get the attention of the policymakers until something happens, unfortunately. I have spent a long time at the Technical University in Delft working on technical systems, and I'm a mathematician, actually, my background. So my interest is in methodological innovation, and I'm quite prepared to jump from subject matter to subject matter if I feel that there is an area where I can contribute something. And I think the area of climate change, in the wide sense, this is an area where we really have to do a better job in quantifying and discussing reasoning under uncertainty. And so I think that's an area where I can contribute, and RFF is a much better place to do that than the Technical University in Delft, and perhaps one of the best places in the world. So I'm very hopeful to get involved in this. And, well, I am involved, but I'd like to get deeper into this problem. The modelers involved in this, there's a lot of physical modeling and also a lot of economic modeling, and they are struggling. They are taking the first steps in uncertainty analysis that we saw in more technical disciplines years ago, and this situation here is more complex, or has complexities that the other systems don't have, and has problems that other systems don't have. But still, you see a lot of the same problems, and people are struggling with a lot of the same issues. And how do you quantify uncertainty? How do you deal with dependence? How do you communicate it? How do you recommend a certain course of action under uncertainty? These are all the questions that have been with us for a long time. Like anything new, there is a resistance, and there is a tendency to temporize and see if you can't get by with your old methods a little longer. So, and it's difficult. Reasoning under uncertainty is difficult. It's something we just don't do particularly well in the natural language and in daily life.